What have you done wrong?
What did I do? I don't know. So that was interesting. So I got to know Graham a bit. And then back in Oxford, I bumped into Graham cycling over Folly Bridge. He said, "Oh, nice to see you again. What are you up to? Let's go for a beer." And we went for a beer somewhere in Oxford. And I said to him, "Look, I was thinking, you know, I didn't have a good answer to the question Tim asked. Where do you go for financial advice and so on in the sector? And don't organisations, quite a lot of NGOs seem to have a bit of difficulty with things that are probably, you know, quite solvable about the basics of getting financial management right. Why don't we do something about that?" And really the idea was I wanted to spend a bit of time at home, having been overseas for a few years. And I had lots of adventures, you know, around the world with Oxfam, and thought this would be a new adventure and a way to see a bit more of my family and friends. And so we went to go and talk to lots of senior people, and they were all quite encouraging and said, "Oh, you know, that's a good idea. Someone should do something about that." But no one really did anything until I went to go and see Joel Joffe, which must have been in about August or September, probably September. And Joel always told this story very nicely. And he always said that he got a phone call in his office in Oxfam saying there's this bloke downstairs who'd like to come and see you. And he said, "Oh, well, I'm too busy. Tell him to go away. And, you know, if he comes back a couple of times, then I'll see if I can make time." And he says, "Oh, but I talked my way in." Whereas I remember it as Joel being incredibly nice and saying, "You do come on up. Of course you can have 5 minutes." And not really knowing what to say to him. And not realising that he had this private charitable trust and that he's well known for funding charitable startups and that he's particularly concerned about accountability and, you know, financial management in NGOs. So actually he was one of the few people in the country who could say straight away, "All right, that sounds like a good idea. I'll fund you to do it," which he did within 10 minutes of that meeting starting.
I think Joel's version of the story is that he actually said, "I'm not going to give any more money to anybody else. Don't send him up." Is that true? Yeah.
That might well be right.
Yes, that's his version anyway.
And then he definitely did say, "And I won't join the board."
Yeah.
And of course, one of the reasons for Mango's success is Joel being the chair of the board for the first, how many years? What was it, 8 years, I think. So we got £20,000 from Joel, Graham and myself. And I always date Mango starting from October 1999, because that's when I first, you know, paid myself a salary. And had this money. I'd never seen a cheque for that much money in my life. I thought, "Well, this is pretty good, £20, what am I going to do with that?" And then it felt a bit wrong, really, to pay myself a salary. It feels a bit, you know, self-centered. But I got over that, to be glad to. And that was October 99, and there were 2 of us. And we then spent a bit of time getting the basics in place and trying to think, well, what are we going to do? And I remember we wrote some of the materials around the register and, you know, how we were going to go around interviewing people. We started thinking about training, but the training side didn't really blossom for another year or 2. When I think, you know, we'd been in touch, Terry and I had been in touch. Somehow in Mango, we got this contract to run a training course in the Carpathian Mountains, which I think is in Romania. It's Romania, is it? And I thought, oh my God, you know, I've got this contract. I don't know very much about training. The only training qualification I've got is as a sailing instructor. That's not much use. But luckily, you know, we were in touch. And so Terry kindly agreed to come out. And I was amazed. She brought a suitcase with her with all these stuff in it, like, you know, Post-it notes and pens and even a little printer. Someone who knows how to do training. And it was very lucky that there was someone there because I didn't know what I was doing. But we put on a week-long course and it kind of worked out. And that must have been in 2001, I think.
Yeah. No, 2000.
Was it 2000?
The hardest I've ever worked in my entire life, I have to tell you.
That's saying
almost no money.
Well, the 20,000 was running a bit thin by then. Spent it. So we got that going, and we got the board going. And it's really worth just dwelling on, just for a moment, just recognising how important the board was, and it is. So we got a great board together, and of course that was all Joel, who basically called up a few of his friends. And we got Colin, who's still on the board, done his time, and John Berg, who sadly died a few years ago, and a couple of other people. And they put in place the overall structure. Just their assumptions about how a board should work and how an executive team should work did so much, I think, to shape some of the more professional aspects of our culture. So from the beginning, it was obvious that we were going to have an annual plan, and we would have a budget, and we would have quarterly reporting, and we would have a board who asked sensible questions and kept us on track. And who also took a real interest, I think, in us all as individuals and wanted it to work for all staff there. And then, gosh, I mean, you'll all remember the bits of the chronology better than I do. So Barbara joined, I think. I don't know if she was our third member of staff or if you were, Tara.
No,
You were the third member of staff, weren't you? And then Barbara. And then Lucy, who came on to run the training side. And at some point, Sarah was running the register. But I think that was after you joined.
I joined the register
Yeah.
in 99, I think.
Did you? Were you one of the very first?
No, 2000.
Yeah.
I think I was number 13.
Good number, lucky 13.
Yeah. But I joined for a summer
And you
to
joined.
cover the register
Yeah.
It was a
because
gap.
Graham left.
It was after Graham.
It was after Graham left, so that must have been quite early.
And then you found yourself a job in Save the Children
that
in
was
South Africa.
That was the deal, wasn't it?
Explicitly, it was the deal. We can't really pay very much, but come and run it and find yourself a good job. And of course, by that time, you'll be glad to know, by that time we'd moved out of my rather small back bedroom. And Graham and I spent, I think it was only about 6 or 9 months in rather close proximity. And luckily there was a guy called Steve down the road who could set up our first ever computer network and get the computers talking to each other, which made a big difference. And we moved into our first office just over the road from Christchurch Meadow, and very nice that was too.
It was.
It was a lovely set of rooms. We were very lucky to get that.
With quite low doors.
Yes, I remember.
Fist bumping.
Fireplace in the office.
in my
doesn't have
office.
a-
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm never going to have an office that nice again. I had a lovely old window looking out over a little courtyard, and I had my own fireplace, and I had a big desk, and I had a
Whoa.
meeting table,
And
and I had
doors.
2 doors that I could
Yes.
shut against the rest of the world, and a private set of stairs out the back I could run away from people. But anyway, time went on, and Mango flourished because it turned out to be the right idea for the time, I think. And it was, we had I think what we had is we had a clear idea of what we were trying to do, and we did that well from the beginning, and we didn't get sucked into doing an awful lot of other things. And I think that's really a foundation of how we were able to be clear what we were offering the world, and to make sure that there were jobs that worked for everybody in the team. So by the time I came to leave, which was 10 years later in 2009, one of the things that I've always was very clear about, that I was most proud of, was that by then there were 17 staff, and it was about £1 million turnover, and it was kind of sustainable. Mango had firm foundations, and a great set of services, and a good set of clients, and a great staff team, and we all knew what we did. And so for everybody in the team, people had, and I think still have, really meaningful jobs, and jobs that worked for them as individuals, and that we could get our teeth into, but which were manageable and weren't going to try to take over your whole life, and that added up to something that we could all believe in. And I think that's a real foundation, and I think that's rare, certainly from what I've seen myself and the organisations I'm still working in right now. It's pretty rare in the NGO world that we all, we often tend to bite off more than we can chew. So I am proud of that, and I think that that's something we got right through the early years, as well as, of course, recruiting fantastic people. And wonderful, really, it really is wonderful to be back with you all here today. I can't tell you how happy I am. It's been a very emotional few weeks, as you can imagine, with Joel dying a couple of weeks ago. And I was saying, that wasn't a surprise. He's obviously been quite ill since Christmas, and and seriously ill. He was 85, and we actually, he celebrated his 85th birthday in early May, the day before the last board meeting we had of the Joffrey Trust. So it was nice that he was able to be at the trust meeting, and we gave him a big box of chocolates and a present of a little carved elephant and so on, because he likes elephants. And he was very actively involved still in that meeting. But it was clear, really, that that was the last one he would be involved in. And it's hard to tell, really. I think it's hard to exaggerate the influence that he had on Mango And certainly I can't exaggerate the influence that he'd had on my life. So I've been working closely with him for the best part of 20 years, and what an inspiration and what a privilege that's been. So at the end of his life, he was as kind-hearted and thoughtful about others and as practical, as unsentimental as ever. And he was still setting this incredibly high bar. So I went to go and see him, literally a week before he died. And there he was, and he was in bed by then. He'd typically tried to be too active, and he had a fall and broken his collarbone and so on. And he wasn't in discomfort. And he said, so I said, how are you? And I said, I hear you've been taking up action sports outside. And he laughed about that. And he said, oh, well, I've been, I'm very ill, and, there it is. And, I'm fine, and I'm getting good care. And he said, right, now that's enough about health. And he wanted to go on and give me a few pointers and deal with a few of the practical things that I was taking on as chair of his trust. And he said now he's a bit worried about this aspects of the finances and, looking over after the investment. So we talked a bit about that. And then he said he thought that, that we'd done pretty well. So that was nice to hear. And we talked a bit about that, about Mango and so on. And he was very proud of Mango. And then he said, now with the trust, he said, I think we've done reasonably. I think we've done reasonably as a set of trustees. No better than that. With a very clear message, you can do better. You better sort yourself out. You better keep going, keep learning, keep improving. And he always had that, I think. He was so warm and kind to everybody, and he gave me such an opportunity, and he gave Mango such an opportunity. And he did that for many other people. So he was a very warm and kind-hearted man with such an easy charm. But also, he was very tough-minded and real analytical insight, and he had a great ability to understand people and to get the sense of what people would contribute and could contribute, and to make difficult decisions and say, we're not going to take on all these different things, or we do have to restructure the organisation and lose staff, and we do have to worry about the money. And I think it was that combination, that he had such compassion and also such rigorous analytical, intellectual approach to the world, that was a big part of allowing him to achieve everything he did achieve. So I know he'd be very proud of what we've all achieved here in Mango, and certainly I am. And I'm delighted that the organisation's thriving and that the friendships are all thriving, that I think are so important to what Mango is and what we do. So, thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you.